Welcome to Tritiyo Matra. Bilateral relations between UK and Bangladesh are one of the most important international relations Bangladesh currently maintains. Not only is the United Kingdom one of Bangladesh's oldest and most significant development partners and trade partners, the two nations also have significant historical and cultural ties. In order to discuss the current trends in UK-Bangladesh relations, we have with us today Robert Chatterton Dickson, the British High Commissioner to Bangladesh. Robert has been British High Commissioner in Dhaka since March 2019, responsible for representing the United Kingdom and leading across the British government's priorities in Bangladesh. His 4-year posting in Bangladesh is soon coming to an end, and I'm sure we are all excited to hear all about his experience as the High Commissioner to Bangladesh. Mr. High Commissioner, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Mr. High Commissioner, we're talking on the first day of Ramadan. So how did you find Ramadan for the last couple of years in Bangladesh? And how has your time been spent so far in Bangladesh? During your long 4 years term, you have been, what have been the biggest challenges you have faced, and what are the biggest success stories of the British High Commission under your leadership?
Well, thank you very much. I mean, I just start by saying what an extraordinary privilege it's been to do this job, and what a wonderful time my partner and I have had here in Bangladesh. We've really enjoyed every aspect of it. And in a way, it's very nice that our last month in Bangladesh is the holy month of Ramadan, because it's a very special time for Muslims. It's a very special time in Bangladesh. And we find we're not Muslims ourselves, but we have an enormous respect for Muslim faith and culture. And I think there's a very special aspect of that you see during this holy month. So it's nice that our fifth, we will actually be here for 5, although only here for just over 4 years, we will be here for 5 Ramadans. Yeah. So I'm very much looking forward to joining friends at iftars and experiencing all the things that Ramadan brings in Bangladesh. And I just say Ramadan Kareem to all of your viewers. In terms of my time here, I mean, it's been an extraordinarily tumultuous period because what we've seen in the world, of course, was the COVID pandemic. We were here for a year, and then COVID hit the world, hit Bangladesh, hit the UK, and that obviously caused enormous disruption. I think Bangladesh navigated COVID remarkably successfully, and we in the UK too ultimately did so. But for both our countries, it was a very challenging and trying period. And subsequent to COVID, of course, we then had the global economic headwinds that were caused by Russia's illegal, unprovoked, barbaric aggression against Ukraine, which has caused enormous disruption around the world. And I'm very conscious that it's caused problems everywhere, but I think it's caused particular problems in developing countries like Bangladesh, where food prices, fuel prices, fertilizer prices are enormously important. And Russian action and the disruption that it's caused has had an enormously negative impact on the lives of many people in Bangladesh, particularly some of the poorest. So it's a matter of great concern. What I've been impressed by is the way in which Bangladesh has responded to that. I mean, I think there was remarkable resilience as a society and as an economy during COVID. And I think we're seeing the same thing during the economic disruption caused by Russian aggression. And I mean, I think it's remarkable that through both of those disruptive periods, the Bangladesh economy has continued to grow. And I think that's a remarkable tribute to the tenacity and creativity of particularly the private sector here in Bangladesh, which I think is incredibly impressive. I'm very pleased that the UK plays an important part in this. We're the second largest investor in Bangladesh, cumulatively. We're the third largest export market. And I think we're going to talk later about the trade relationship, but there's some really exciting things going on there. But I've also been pleased that we've been able to do some other interesting things. Clearly the period that I've been here was also marked by the very sad death of Her Majesty the Queen. I was very pleased that the Honourable Prime Minister was able to represent Bangladesh at Her Majesty's funeral. I think we're looking forward to welcoming her potentially to the coronation of His Majesty, which will be taking place in May. So there's a reminder of the very strong relationship that exists between Bangladesh and the UK in all sorts of ways, including from the very top. but also reflected, as I've said, in trade, investment, and in the very strong links between the British Bangladeshi diaspora, who play an increasingly important, visible, confident role in our society and provide a living bridge between the UK and this great country of Bangladesh.
Bangladesh is going through a period of drastic changes currently, and we have the upcoming graduation from least developed country status, increasing relevance in the geopolitical dynamic of the Indo-Pacific region, and rapid socio-economic development. From your perspective, how has Bangladesh changed from the time right before you took office in 2019 to now?
Well, I think the change is visible everywhere. I mean, I think just to give a really tangible example, I mean, the biggest single change, I think, has been the opening of the Padma Bridge. If you look at how that changes the whole economic geography of Bangladesh, it's a great achievement, a great technical achievement, but it's also hugely important in terms of the way that Bangladesh is interconnected, not just within Bangladesh, but also providing greater connectivity to India. And I think that's incredibly important. And of course, it's not just Padma Bridge, it's also the very visible change through the metro rail. That's now started operating. The new airport was just a pipe dream when I arrived and is now very visible, and I know is opening later this year. We've seen the flyovers opening. So there's a lot of very visible changes in infrastructure, which is obviously very necessary for the country to continue to grow. But I think more than that, I mean, we're now obviously, LDC graduation is much closer than it was. It's now a very tangible thing. And I think it's absolutely right that there's a lot of thinking and discussion going on about how Bangladesh is going to continue to grow and flourish as a middle-income country. And I think for me, the key is, when you look at it, what is going to be needed is that there is going to be less direct overseas development assistance. There'll be less money flowing through those channels. But what will become more important is the private sector. So I think what is really critical for the next phase of development for Bangladesh is developing institutions that give confidence to private investors to bring their money in, put it to work in Bangladesh to the benefit of the Bangladeshi people, but also to the benefit of the investors themselves. And I think if I look at what's changed over the last 4 years, I think there's two things I'd highlight. One is the way in which there's much more discussion about what is needed for continued growth. And it's different from what has powered growth for the last 2 decades. And as I said, institutional quality is the key to that. The second thing I'd say is we've radically changed our own development engagement with Bangladesh. Because when I arrived 4 years ago, we still had these very big programs to directly provide health and education programming. And we're really not doing that anymore. We've shifted to a smaller, more focused program based on climate, women and girls, governance, and the help that we're giving for the Rohingya crisis. And that is much more, that is not us delivering services directly, that is us providing technical advice and that sort of development advisory support, which I think is going to be increasingly the way that Bangladesh will receive development assistance from its major partners, including ourselves.
As you know, Bangladesh enjoys a lot of privileges due to its membership in the Commonwealth of Nations, and the perceptions of most Bangladeshi people regarding the UK as a development partner, as a potential location to acquire higher education, and in terms of tourism are quite positive. From your experience, what is the current perception of the people of the United Kingdom regarding Bangladesh, and has there been any significant change in the general perception over time?
The perception of Bangladesh in the UK?
Yeah.
I think it's very positive. I mean, I think what we have is obviously what people see in front of them is the diaspora. And the Bangladeshi diaspora is increasingly confident and visible in Bangladesh, including, of course, members of parliament. We have Rushanara Ali, our trade envoy, who's actually in Bangladesh at the moment, pursuing trade objectives, which we'll talk about in a minute. But there are 3 other British Bangladeshi members of parliament who are very visible parts of our democratic system. And then there are Bangladeshi lawyers, doctors, entertainers, and of course there is the ubiquitous curry industry, which is a symbolic Bangladeshi institution which has radically changed the way that people eat in the UK. So I think people think very positively about Bangladesh. I think, if I'm honest, it would be good if there's more appreciation for Bangladesh as it is now. I think more can be done to sell the story of Bangladesh's economic transformation in the UK. I think people are very conscious of Bangladesh as the sort of heroic liberation struggle of 50 years ago, and that, of course, is still hugely respected. But I think, I think the story of Bangladesh's economic transformation is one that is not yet sufficiently appreciated in the UK. And it's something I always point out to companies. I was very pleased in this context to say that just yesterday we had an aviation summit. So Airbus, which is one of the world's two big civilian aviation producers, they are now very interested in Bangladesh. They have not been represented here before. They have in the distant past, but at the moment there is not a single Airbus aircraft registered in Bangladesh. And they have products that are enormously, I think, have enormous potential to help the Bangladesh economy to grow, both in terms of freighter capacity with the A350F, which is Rolls-Royce powered, and the other passenger aircraft that they offer. And it's really good that we now see, massive global companies with a very significant British component interested in coming to Bangladesh really to start a new business here. And I think how Airbus is received here, they had a very positive reception yesterday with the aviation summit. Very senior speakers at that, a really good discussion about all the different things that the two sides can do together to develop aviation and the aviation industry, the ecosystem in Bangladesh. But I think translating that into real deeds, real partnerships, real orders will be very important. And I think that will send a strong signal to other major industries in the UK about the opportunity that is available here in Bangladesh.
Indeed, it sounds good. Mr. Robert, the United Kingdom's Indo-Pacific Minister, Anne-Marie Trevelyan, arrived in Dhaka on 10th March to discuss security, democracy, human rights, trade and Rohingya crisis. This is, of course, a very high-level diplomatic visit to Bangladesh, one of many high-profile visits Bangladesh has been honored with recently. I will ask more detailed questions about the minister's statements, but first I would like to ask in general your thoughts about the visit. What statement is being made by the UK FCDO through this visit, and what this means for the trajectory of UK-Bangladesh bilateral relations?
Thank you. Well, it was a real pleasure. I mean, she is Anne-Marie Trevelyan is, as you say, the UK Minister for the Indo-Pacific. She took up that role last year. She had not been to Bangladesh before, and she had a brilliant time here. I mean, she worked very hard. We squeezed a lot into her 2.5 days here. But she was able to meet the Honourable Prime Minister. They had a very wide-ranging discussion. She went to the Investment Summit and made a speech there. She made a speech at the Foreign Service Academy. She met the Foreign Minister. She did a whole range of different things, which really, and she came away very positive. I mean, at the end of the visit, she was tired but very happy with how the visit had gone. And I think really appreciated for the first time, having seen it on the ground, the extraordinary potential in the relationship between the UK and Bangladesh. And I think what's interesting is we had the first strategic, what we call Indo-Pacific tilt in 2021. We had an integrated look at our foreign security defence policy after we left the European Union. And we published a report in 2021 which identified Indo-Pacific. This part of the world is where the real growth and real economic activity, real economic dynamism is going to be over the next 2 or 3 decades. So we made a very conscious decision to invest in these relationships, including in the relationship between the UK and Bangladesh as part of that. And even though, since that report was published, we have had the appalling Russian, barbaric, illegal, unprovoked aggression against Ukraine, we republished, we had a refreshed look at our integrated review published last month. And that concluded that Indo-Pacific is still where we need to be. We have a huge challenge to our security in Europe from Russia, but we still think this is where we need to be. Indo-Pacific is where we need to be reinvesting in relationships. So I think we will continue to have that focus in our relationship with the whole region, including here in Bangladesh, where we have some particular advantages to work with, as we've been discussing, whether it's the diaspora, our existing trade relationship, our existing economic relationship. And I think it was really good to have the Minister here to confirm, including at the highest level to the Honourable Prime Minister, how important this region and this country are to us, and to look at all the many ways in which we can build on that in the years ahead.
The Minister announced a new UK funding package through the World Food Programme to help 449,000 people living in the Rohingya refugee camps. According to the Minister, I quote, the UK is committed to supporting Rohingya people who continue to live in Cox's Bazar. We are helping the World Food Programme feed 449,000 people, as well as providing pressure cookers that can help to reduce the consumption of cooking gas, unquote. Now I wanted to ask, how did this idea of supporting pressure cookers to the refugee originate, and what does the rest of the package entail?
Well, I think that cooking, that's a really interesting question, actually, because, I mean, if you look at the bigger picture, I mean, the Rohingyas, it's a tragic situation. Bangladesh did an enormous act of generosity, benefiting humanity as a whole, by admitting the Rohingyas when they were forced out of their homes in Rakhine by the ethnic cleansing, the terrible crimes against them that were committed by the Myanmar regime in 2017. And clearly, you know, it's a major burden. Having 1 million refugees is a major burden. And we are working with our partners to try and support the refugees until they can go home to Myanmar. And we're absolutely clear. The refugees always say, whenever you talk to them, they want to go home. We want them to go home. Bangladesh wants them to go home. But they can only do that when they can do it in a way that is safe, dignified and voluntary. And at the moment, they can't do that. And so we all have this responsibility to look after them until they can return home. And part of that is enabling them, obviously, to feed themselves, which is why we're funding the World Food Programme. But I have to say, international funding is under a lot of pressure in this area. If you look at all the crises around the world since 2017, we've had Afghanistan, you know, the crisis there is very serious. We've had the crisis caused in Ukraine by the illegal, barbaric, brutal Russian aggression. We've had continuing crises in the Horn of Africa, continuing crisis in Yemen. So there is a really severe pressure on international humanitarian funding. And at the moment, the Joint Response Plan, which is the international plan which was launched this month to sustain the Rohingyas, is not fully funded at all. It's funded at about 10%. So what that means is that we all need to work together to get the maximum value out of each pound, each taka, each dollar that goes into the response. And pressure cookers are a really good way of doing that, because one of the things that has really changed in the camps for the better since I first went there 4 years ago is that they are now much greener, because the refugees, when they first arrived, people have to cook, and they cooked by basically cutting down the trees. And the point about the LPG supplies is that enables them not to cut down the trees. They can cook with the LPG. And the camps, there's been a very good effort by the UN, the government and the refugees themselves to green the camps. So the camps are now a much pleasanter environment with much more trees. But clearly what we want is to get the maximum value out of the LPG. And the best way to make LPG go further is to give people pressure cookers. So it's an investment in getting more value out, as I said, out of each taka that goes into the response.
Mr. High Commissioner, the Minister Ane also stated that the visit reaffirms the UK's firm commitment to Bangladesh as a first growing Indo-Pacific partner with strong people-to-people connections. How do you expect this Indo-Pacific partnership between the UK and Bangladesh to pan out in the coming days, and what might be the ideal form of this partnership in the volatile geopolitical climate of the Indo-Pacific?
Well, that's an enormous question. If I take parts of it, I mean, I think when I look at aspects of the relationship, I think we have, as we've said, we have a partnership that is based on people to people. We have a partnership that is based on constitutional government, a partnership that is based on shared values. If you look at the values in the constitution of Bangladesh around democracy, human rights, freedom of speech, secularism, those values are very important in the UK as well. So I think, you know, that is also a really important underpinning of the partnership. I think trade is very important. We are already Bangladesh's third largest export market. Bangladesh is a key part of the supply chain for crucial British retailers. I mean, if you look at the biggest British retailers, companies like Marks and Spencer, Next, Primark, Bangladesh is an enormously important part of their supply chains. You know, they source in Bangladesh because Bangladesh represents reliable, quality, value for money, and compliant. I mean, there is a huge consciousness in the British retail sector about having clothes that are produced by workers in decent conditions in safe factories. And there's been enormous progress on that in Bangladesh over the last 10 years since Rana Plaza. And so British retailers are now confident about Bangladesh's ability to supply ethically produced, good quality clothing at a competitive price. So there's that. There's investment. As I said, we now have Airbus interested in Bangladesh, and there could definitely be an investment part of that relationship. And more than that, we have a very strong defence and security relationship. We have a very good relations already between our defence forces based on training, exercises, those sort of things. And what I've been really pleased about, actually, one of the things I've been pleased about as High Commissioner is there had been a long gap between visits by the Royal Navy to Bangladesh. And I'm very pleased that we had not one but two visits by the Royal Navy as part of a visible sign of our Indo-Pacific tilt in the defence field. So in 2021, we had a visit by HMS Kent, which was part of our carrier strike group deployment. And in January this year, we had a visit by HMS Tamar, which is one of our permanently deployed offshore patrol vessels. So really, wherever you look, you can see a relationship that is in good heart, but also has the potential to do even more. And I very much envy my successor, who I think has got a really interesting hand of cards to play, and a much greater awareness than existed even 4 years ago about the importance of Bangladesh as a component in our national strategy of increasing our presence and commitment to the Indo-Pacific region.
One of the biggest outcomes of the minister's visit was the new Bangladesh-UK Accord on climate change, where both nations signed an agreement for working together on climate action bilaterally and multilaterally to help deliver the outcomes of COP26 and COP27. How significant is this new accord in the UK and Bangladesh shared commitment to finding solutions for climate vulnerable nations like Bangladesh?
Well, I think it is significant. It was a big negotiation. I mean, it's a good document. And it reflects the commitments that we made at COP26 to put climate funding into Bangladesh. And what will be done under this accord is a wide range of activity. That will include mitigation. Mitigation is not increasing the amount of carbon that goes into the atmosphere. And we'll be working with Bangladesh to try and scale up renewables, look at regional opportunities for generating power in a sustainable way. So there's that. And then there's a significant adaptation element. Adaptation is how you evolve your society in a way that will adapt to avoiding the worst aspects of climate change. Obviously, in Bangladesh, there's a lot of challenge on that already, and we're very conscious in working with Bangladesh that Bangladesh is the eighth most vulnerable country, and probably the biggest. It's the most vulnerable large country to the effects of climate change. And there have been some huge successes in adaptation already in Bangladesh. So we'll be working with our Bangladesh partners to both further increase Bangladesh's adaptive capacity, but also look at how the lessons learned in Bangladesh about things like cyclone awareness, cyclone shelters, can be exported to other parts of the world. And one of the things that we're doing, which I'm very pleased about, is we're supporting the Global Centre for Adaptation. Is a very interesting organisation based in the Netherlands, and they have their Global Centre for Locally Led Adaptation here in Dhaka. We have supported that, and I think that's an enormously significant thing because there is so much that the world can learn from Bangladesh's experience in this field already. And then the third thing that the Accord will be doing is making sure that Bangladesh is ready to receive climate finance from around the world, because although you could argue that the world has not yet put all the money it should into climate finance, it is still putting a lot of money into climate finance, and there is a very good case for plenty of that money coming to Bangladesh. But the business of receiving climate finance from the World Bank, from the ADB, from all the different providers of finance around the world, that is a complicated thing and needs expertise in itself. It was part of the IMF agreement with the government at the end of last year. And I think increasing the expertise of the Bangladesh government and people in Bangladesh to work with these institutions and really put the climate funding to work in a way that makes a practical difference is very important. So that is an element also of the Accord. And I think it's an excellent document. I'm very pleased that the Minister was able to sign it when she was here. And it's a really important part of our relationship going forward, where I think we and the government here are completely aligned on the vital importance of the issue to everyone, all of us living on Earth. And I think it's a really good sign of what we can learn from Bangladesh and what we can contribute here.
The Minister also stated that preventing politically targeted arrests, detention and legal cases can increase people's trust in elections. Is there a concern in the UK regarding the state of elections run by Bangladesh as indicative from the last two general elections? 2014, 2018.
Well, I wasn't here for those elections, so I can't comment directly from my own experience. What I can say is that there's plenty of, I think, well-evidenced suggestions that there were problems. And I think what we should do now is look ahead to the next election, which I'm very sorry I won't be here for, because it's obviously going to be a pivotal moment. I think it's going to be a really vital moment in the development of Bangladesh, because I think, as I said, institutional quality, having quality institutions that will be able to attract and retain international investment is going to be really important for the next stage of Bangladesh's development. And I think in a democratic country, then the quality of elections underpins the quality of the government and the quality of institutions more generally. And I think it will be very important. I think the world will be watching these elections. And I think everyone will be better off if the elections are regarded as free, fair, everyone participates, there's a level playing field before, votes are counted in a fair and transparent way, and then there is, agreement on the outcome, which is shared among the parties and international friends. And I think it would be a very good thing if all the different parties can be discussing this among themselves. I think there's no place for violence in any political process, and I think agreement between the parties that on the principles under which the election will be conducted is really important. And I would strongly urge the parties, in as far as they can, to talk to each other about this, to avoid violence, to agree on the way in which the Election Commission can do its job. And we as the international community will be happy to help that. And I think one thing we could do, as was discussed by visiting members of the British Parliament with the Prime Minister in January, we could be helping through providing international observation. And I think that would be a very positive thing. So we are working with others on how this might be delivered. But what I would say is I've seen elsewhere in the world, in earlier parts of my career, the crucial role that international observation can play in developing the confidence of participants in the electoral process. And we will certainly be very interested as the UK in contributing to a wider international effort to support the election through international observation.
So already you have mentioned this, that 4 British MP, Rushnara Ali, Jonathan Reynolds, Mohammad Yassin and Tom Hunt made a call to the Prime Minister's office earlier this year, and afterwards the PM had made a press statement stating that Bangladesh doesn't have any problem if the UK sends election observers during the general elections. The context indicates that the UK is preparing to send election observers to Bangladesh. Can you officially confirm this again?
Well, I would say we're very interested. We would like to do it. Exactly how? I mean, I think the point about observers is an observation mission needs to be large enough, needs to have the right access, needs to have the right support so that they can really understand the process that is taking place in front of them. And so we are talking to other potential contributors in the international community about how best to deliver this. And then obviously we'll need to discuss it with the Election Commission and with others about how we can make sure that it's a positive contribution. And so, the mandate, the scale, the timing, all of those things will be important. But we are discussing this with others at the moment. And I would very much expect the UK to be part of this. I think the more that it is a collective endeavour by a variety of international friends, the better. So we're looking at the practicalities of how we can best do that.
Okay. And democracy across the world seems to be backsliding due to various factors, as you mentioned earlier, and Bangladesh is continuously committed to upholding the mandates of democracy. Do you believe that international election observers from other democratic nations should be mandatory for all developing democracies where state institutions are still struggling to function under the democratic mandate?
Well, I don't think they should be mandatory, because I think they need to, each country is different, each country has its own way of doing democracy. But I do think, as I said, that elections in any democratic system, the elections is the most basic. If the elections aren't good, if the elections aren't good, if you have a country which is a democracy constitutionally, but it doesn't have good elections, then it's not really a democracy. A democracy depends on free and fair and credible elections. And I would never say that it should be mandatory, but I do think that in a place where there have been questions about previous elections, in any country where there have been questions about electoral practice, then I think international observation done right, as I said, with the ability, with the scale and mandate and understanding of what they're seeing, I think that can make a contribution. And I've seen that, as I said, in earlier parts of my career in different parts of the world where that can make a real difference. And I think if you have an election that is free, fair, credible, then that is a much, much better basis for reform and for carrying any country through significant economic change as it occurs. And as I said, I think it is the best way to enable the people to decide the direction of the country. And I think that means that it's much easier for the institutions then to do their job properly. And I think on that depends the confidence of international investors. free and fair elections support political stability, and political stability supports international investment.
Bangladesh has its national action plan with an ambitious investment target of 230 billion US dollar that can hopefully be harnessed from international climate funds. It is stated that the United Kingdom government will play a significant role in implementing the national action plan's suggested initiatives. Can we have some details of how the UK will assist Bangladesh in implementing its adaptation and mitigation plans?
Well, as I said, this is in the climate accord we were talking about a minute ago, and I think what I would point to, as I said, there is an enormous amount of money available. Bangladesh quite rightly has a very long-term plan, and I think the National Action Plan, the Delta Plan, the Mujib Climate Prosperity Plan, there are some really excellent plans here. So there is plenty that international climate investment can be put into in a way that would make a positive difference here. But accessing, there's a lot of funds and there's a lot of uses for the funds, and joining those two things up in a way that means that the funding really goes to the right place, is spent effectively, that is quite a task. And as I said, one of the things that the Climate Accord aims to do is to work with Bangladesh to invest in the ability of the country as a whole to put international climate funding to good use.
Mr. Dickson, during the second Bangladesh-UK trade and investment dialogue held in February this year, Bangladesh welcomed the UK's generous developing countries trading scheme, DCTS, and the UK side also related the commitments under the DCTS to international conventions on labor standards and human rights, anti-corruption, climate change, and the environment. What are the biggest advantages Bangladesh might attain in the developing countries trading schemes, and what are the biggest commitments Bangladesh will have to provide in order to access those benefits?
Well, I think the developing countries trading scheme, DCTS, it's really important because one of the challenges for Bangladesh as it goes through LDC graduation is potentially losing duty-free, quota-free access in important markets. And the UK is the third largest market. It's growing quite quickly for Bangladesh. We import about £4 billion a year from Bangladesh. So it's a really important, and as I said, there is a really strong relationship between the big buyers in the UK and the major suppliers here. And that's a very positive thing. And what Developing Countries Trading Scheme does is it basically provides duty-free, quota-free access to Bangladesh for the long term. So the buyers and the suppliers can do business knowing that they are, and they can plan for the long term, knowing that they are safe from having tariffs or quotas imposed, indefinitely. And that's a really attractive proposition. I think Bangladesh is probably the largest, or it's unusual among developing countries in having one incredibly competitive ecosystem in garments. Garments, the Bangladesh garment industry is a remarkable success story. It's hugely impressive, and clearly that means that Bangladesh, more than most developing countries, is already able to take advantage of DCTS, Developing Countries Trading Scheme, and the privileges that provides. Now, as you said, the DCTS is not condition-free. It does have clauses about labour rights, human rights, corruption, all of those things. We don't yet have the detail on exactly how those things will be monitored and implemented. But at the moment, I think DCTS provides Bangladeshi companies with a remarkable access to one of their most important markets. And I hope that will continue to develop this really excellent trading relationship. What I would also hope, as I mentioned, is that I think there's a good opportunity for Bangladesh to import more from the UK. We would very much like to be selling more services here. So as the economy becomes more sophisticated and bigger and wealthier, then I think UK education services become very attractive. I think UK financial services, life insurance, those sort of things become very attractive. And as I said, we see a real opportunity for partnership in the aerospace sector. So we had this aviation summit just yesterday. Airbus, a large company with very significant British components, and Rolls-Royce, who provide the engines for many of their aircraft, are very interested in Bangladesh. And I think if we could see the continued success of Bangladesh exporting ready-made garments, and hopefully other things as well, it would be very good to diversify that export basket. But if we were to see continuing increase in exports to the UK, but also greater import of high-quality goods, services, products that Bangladesh will need to grow from the UK, a more balanced relationship in that sense, then I think that would be a very good thing.
During the dialogue, you stated the importance of maintaining a level playing field in Bangladesh for foreign companies interested in investing and operating in Bangladesh. What is the current status of the playing field in Bangladesh right now, from your knowledge, and how might Bangladesh attempt to resolve its biggest barriers to acquiring more foreign investment?
Well, I mean, Bangladesh actually gets rather little foreign investment. I know the investment summit recently achieved some successes, but I think the thing that foreign investment can do more than anything, obviously, it brings in capital, which is going to be needed for investment to put to continue to grow the economy. But more than that, what we see, we have. If you look at the big British companies doing business here, they play a really important role in Bangladesh. So companies like HSBC, Standard Chartered Bank, Unilever play a really important role as providers. They show that business done to the highest global standards can thrive and prosper in Bangladesh. And I think sometimes I feel that there is a tendency to see foreign direct investment as people building garment factories in special economic zones, and that's fine. But I think what is much more useful is the ability of big international companies here to do business in the wider economy. And as I said, I think there's a particular opportunity in higher education and in financial services, possibly in health services, and also, as I said, in aerospace. And I think the point is, if those companies can work in the wider economy in the way that Unilever and HSBC do, then they train people, they bring in know-how, they bring in technical standards, and they show that businesses operating in all British businesses, because they're bound by very strict legislation, have to operate in a highly ethical way. And I think they demonstrate that it is possible for businesses to do well by operating to global standards in this market. And I think the more companies can do that, then the more demonstration effect there is about the potential in this market.
A large number of Bangladeshis are very interested in studying in UK educational institutions. You once stated that there is a potential for UK-based higher education institutes to open offices in Bangladesh. According to you, I quote, at least 9 UK universities are keen to come to Bangladesh and open campuses. Is there anything under work between the UK and Bangladesh to allow this development to happen?
Well, I think there's two answers to that question. The first is, I mean, actually education has been a huge success. Mm-hmm. So the number of Bangladeshi students in the UK has around doubled in the time that I've been here. And I think that's great. I mean, I'm delighted that young Bangladeshis are able to go to the UK and get a world-class education. And I think learn from being in the UK, learn from being in a different society and contribute to that society while they're there. And one of my favourite things actually is having alumni events. So we have a very strong network of Commonwealth scholars, mm-hmm. Chevening scholars. Just the other night I did an alumni for Imperial College London graduates in Bangladesh, who are some of the most impressive contributors to science, technology, all of those things here. So we already have a very vibrant higher education relationship. But at the moment it's limited because in order to go and study in the UK, people have either to be prosperous enough to pay for it, and it's quite expensive, or they have to win scholarships. And we only have so many scholarships that we can give. So what I would like to happen, if we can make it happen, is to have more UK universities doing what they have done successfully in other countries, including Sri Lanka and Malaysia, and open campuses or provide access to their courses through partnerships of various different kinds here in Bangladesh. And at the moment, I have to say, I don't think we're really fulfilling the potential of this. We know that there are UK companies, UK universities that are interested in investing here. They would like to provide their courses to young Bangladeshis, and particularly in areas that will be important, the sort of technical and scientific areas that are really important to a growing economy. But I have to say, this has not been. We have made less progress in my 4 years here than I would have hoped. We know that there are UK universities that are interested, but for a variety of reasons, it has not been possible to actually make a great deal of progress. We've made limited progress in some areas. So, the London School of Economics now offers a very narrow range of courses through a particular institution here. But I think there is so much more we could be doing in this area. And if we could, the beneficiaries would be young Bangladeshis who would get better value. They would get globally recognized qualifications, which is not always easy here. And they would then contribute to the growth of Bangladesh. So to me, it looks like a win-win. And I haven't quite been able to pin down why it's been so difficult to actually make this happen. And I have to say the problem, of course, is that there's a lot of this is quite a resource intensive thing. If you're a UK university who can invest anywhere in the world, and you're thinking, shall I invest in Bangladesh? If you come here and you don't make progress, well, you go somewhere else. And that, I think, is what's tending to happen at the moment. So I would very much like it if that can change. I hope my successor will have a better time. But as I said, we've made, not for want of trying on my part, but we've made less progress on this than I would have hoped.
And finally, what about Bangladesh? Will you miss the most when you leave?
Well, Zilor, I'm going to miss everything about Bangladesh. I've been very happy here. It really feels like home, and I'm genuinely very sorry. I'm very sad to be leaving. It feels like a real wrench, and I think I'm going to feel very. I'm going to feel very bereft when I wake up in London at the end of this month, and I'm not in Bangladesh anymore. I'm really very sad to be leaving. I think I'm going to miss everything. I think there's so much about Bangladesh that I respect and admire. I think I really admire the tenacity and creativity of the Bangladeshi people. I think what's been achieved in this country through human endeavour in the last 50 years is remarkable. From a very difficult start, a country that is graduating from LDC status. I really admire and enjoy the way that debate and discussion are conducted here. I mean, there is never a shortage of opinions in Bangladesh, and that means it's a fantastically rewarding place to be a diplomat, because as a diplomat, what you want to do is talk to as many people as possible and get their opinions and engage them. And Bangladesh is a wonderful place for that. There's fantastic arts, culture, creativity here. We've got so many friends in those areas. We've really enjoyed that. As I said, I find the young Bangladeshis very inspiring. I think the sort of people that have been to university in the UK, or we meet through civil society organisations, very, very impressive, very inspiring. So there is a huge amount that has just been wonderful to be here. Apart from COVID, the awful thing about COVID was we were all shut off from each other, but when COVID has not been causing a sort of limitation on human relations, I've just loved it here. And the food, of course, is very good as well. That's another wonderful thing. And I very much enjoyed, I've travelled quite extensively in Bangladesh, as much as I possibly can. I've been to all the different corners of this fascinating country. And I've loved it. I'm going to miss everything about it.
Robert, indeed will miss you, and Bangladesh will, of course, miss you. And thank you, Mr. High Commissioner, for your most insightful comments. We are truly blessed to have you with us for the last 4 years, and we wish you all the best for your future. Dear viewers, thank you for being with us. Stay safe and take care.